Starting now. Wonderful. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Dr. Elizabeth Webb Professional Learning Series. Today is February 22, 2024, and I would like to thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Judith Chavarria. I'm a program specialist at the DOE, and I have been working with MLs over 20 years. And of course, joined Georgia TESOL a couple years ago, and it is a delightful experience to be here tonight presenting this amazing presentation that we have for tonight. Before we begin, I would like to remind you of some features of the 2024 Dr. Elizabeth Webb Professional Learning Series. To start with, you may remember that the theme of this series is disciplinary language and literacy communities of practice, and we do talks twice a month. We also do professional learning for all areas of the TESOL profession. We also hold the Georgia TESOL socials, and if you haven't joined them, I really recommend you do because they're pretty fun. I encourage you to attend them. Our professional learning topics are, of course, administration, adult education and community engagement, higher education and research, which is what this session is about, and of course, teaching and learning, which is all about supporting students and teachers. Okay, and now it is a pleasure for me to introduce you to our two amazing guest speakers of the night, Dr. Alice Reyes and Dr. Eliana Hirano. And although they will have the chance to introduce themselves and talk more about their work, I would like to briefly share with you some highlights. Dr. Alice Reyes is an associate professor of education at Georgia Southern University. She serves as the Teaching Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Students MED Program Director and the ESOL Endorsement Coordinator. Prior to her earning of the PhD in Education in Culture, Curriculum, and Change at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2018, Dr. Reyes taught middle and high school in Connecticut and Arizona and worked with Latin-serving nonprofit organizations in North Carolina. Her experiences teaching across a wide range of contexts inform her commitment to providing culturally and linguistically responsive educational experiences to students in P-12 schools and beyond. She joins the Georgia TESOL Journal as a senior editor in 2023. Dr. Eliana Hirano is an associate professor of teacher education at the director of teaching English as a foreign language minor at Berry College. She is also a senior editor for the Georgia TESOL Journal. She is originally from Brazil and obtained her PhD in applied linguistics at Georgia State University. Her research explores the intersection between identity and language learning, academic literacies, and L2 teacher education. And now I let you with them. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute here. So thank you, Judith, for introducing us. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's such a pleasure to be here with everybody and talk a little bit about the Georgia TESOL Journal that Alex and I are so passionate about. So I will start. Alex, would you like to talk a little bit about the outline, actually?
Sure. Thank you. It's always a struggle to find the unmute button. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging out. I'm excited to see several friends, colleagues, former students, etc. here with us. So great to see you. Yeah, so we're going to, if you want to go ahead to the next slide, please.
Yes, and let me know if you would prefer sharing your screen, Dr. Reyes.
I'm sorry?
Would you prefer share your screen? Just let me know,
I
no
think
problem.
Dr. Hirano was going to share her screen.
Yes.
Sounds good. Let me go ahead and then stop sharing so you can go ahead and
I'll just go ahead while we get that sorted. So basically just want to give you a quick outline and overview of what we're going to talk about this evening. So we're here to kind of talk to you about the Georgia TESOL Journal. And first with a little bit of an introduction about our editorial team. So you've already gotten some introduction. Thank you to Eliana and myself, but we also want to introduce our associate editors. Then we're going to talk about just kind of broadly what is the journal, and then go through the different types of publications that we publish in the journal, and then kind of give you all some time and space to ask any questions that you might have from us. So that's
I'm sorry, we're just having a little bit of a problem here.
That's fine.
Are we good?
Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. And I think there are people in the chat room, just so you all know. But yeah, so we already, Judith did a great job introducing ourselves. I just want to briefly introduce our associate editors. So we have two associate editors in the journal. And on the left, we have Dr. Ethan Tring, who just finished his PhD. He defended recently from Georgia State University in education. He's currently now Associate Director of Atlanta Global Study Center. It's a collaboration between Georgia State and Georgia Tech. His PhD was in language and literacy. And on the right, we have Abdul Samad Humaydan. He's currently a lecturer in the Department of Linguistics at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And he's working to finish his PhD in language literacy and culture at the Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. So let's talk a little bit about what the journal is. So Dr. Reyes.
Thank you. So a little bit. So for those of you who are not super familiar with the Georgia TESOL Journal, that is the journal of the Georgia TESOL professional organization. And one of the things that is sort of unique to us is that we focus on including articles that are not only research-based and empirical, but also practical and theoretical, right? So we're trying to bridge these different these different kind of types of writing to make sure that we're really reaching our audience, because we have a very diverse membership, and to make sure that we're publishing articles that are going to be relevant for people across different dimensions of the field. And so what's kind of interesting to see, I just learned that this tool exists, that I can see all these cool graphs. So our most recent journal was published in October of 2022. And as we mentioned, Dr. Hirano and myself are new in the position of senior editors of the journal. And so in this transition, we're in the process of getting ready to put out the next issue. But just so you can see from that time how the readership on a monthly basis, right, can vary anywhere from at least 100 people looking at these articles all the way up to, you know, in some months when people are getting wild, like almost 800, right? And so really thinking about this readership, not only folks in Georgia, in P12 settings, in higher education, but graduate students, undergraduates, and also people in other countries are also looking at our work. So that's something that I would really want to encourage. I know that everybody is doing really great work. And so we're here to talk to you about why you should share it, and that this is one great way for you to do that.
Thank you. Yes, so one of the, why am I not being able to move my, okay. So one of the, like Dr. Reyes said, one of the features that we, a writer needs to consider is whether the Georgia TESOL Journal would be a good fit for the kind of work that you are writing about. So I'm going to look at the mission of the journal. This is a very lengthy text, so we're not going to read the whole thing, but first of all, it's very important to note that the Georgia TESOL Journal is an academic peer-reviewed journal. That means that this is the real thing, right? So we are academic, we are peer-reviewed. So that brings the seriousness to the journal and the reputation that it has. But it's also important to note that we are a practitioner-oriented journal. So what that means is that we want to make the journal and the articles in the journal approachable to a wide range of readership. Some journals out there, they're great, but they're, for example, very focused on researchers. They are from researchers to researchers, so they might use terminology that a practitioner may not be familiar with, and you read an article and you cannot connect. So in the Georgia TESOL Journal, all the articles should not have any language that is so obscure that people would not understand what they're reading. We want people to be able to relate to what they're reading. So there are different types of articles. We'll talk about them in a minute, but essentially, even when you have a research article, the research article should make the bridge between research and practice very clear for the reader, so that this way the reader can actually see how that piece of research is relevant to their practice, right? So we try to avoid any kind of terminology that is so specialized in a certain field that others cannot connect with. So even when we use specialized terminology, then we make a point of explaining what that means so that others can understand what we're talking about. So with that, we like to have readers who are practitioners, so they can be teachers, they can be educators, they can be researchers, program educators, students, graduate students, undergraduate students. So we have a wide readership in the journal. And what also makes the Georgia TESOL Journal very particular and very special, and I think that's a passion of all of us here that work with the journal, is the fact that we are committed to supporting and mentoring novice writers. So if you send something to us and we think that the idea is really great, it shows innovation, it's a great topic to explore, even if the writing is not academically flawless, we will work with the authors to make it good for publication. And that's a huge step. We understand that academic writing is nobody's first language. Everybody has to learn academic writing. It's something that you develop over time. So the reviewers, the editors, the associate editors, we all make a point to work with novice writers till the manuscript is at the point of manuscript. What really matters to us is that the idea, we believe, is worthwhile publishing. The journal has different kinds of articles, manuscripts that we accept, going from research, theory, pedagogy, teaching practices. We'll talk about each of them in a little bit. And we also address different kinds of multilingual learners, from US-born bilinguals, Generation 1.5, immigrants, refugees, international students. If you're not familiar with the terminology, Generation 1.5 refers to the students or the multilingual learners that came to the US at an early age. So they're not like the immigrants, full immigrants like their parents, but so they came here at a young age, so they grow up kind of like being, children of immigrants, but so they were born elsewhere, but they had most of their education here in the US. So, and also, I'm not sure if we clarified it. If anybody is in the audience and you have any question at any point, please add the questions to the chat. Judith is checking the chat, and then if there is any question that's immediately related to what we're talking, she's free to interrupt us at any point. So let's talk about different submission types. Again, if I can go there. Okay. So the first submission type is the typical classic empirical research or literature review. So these are research-based articles, and we are very strict with this, really showing rigorous scholarship. It's an original contribution to the field. The references are well sound, and the literature is sound, and it is really an innovative piece. And that also it will provide, again, as I mentioned earlier, insights to the readers as to how this research can be applied in practice, right? So we are not the type of journal that will publish research just for the sake of research. The practical implications or pedagogical implications have to be very clear in the article. So the length that we expect is 15 to 25 pages. These are double spaced and should include references and appendices. So as with any research piece, you need to find a gap that your study is addressing to make it innovative, to make it an original contribution. Now, this gap can vary widely in what it refers to, right? So It could be a literature gap. Perhaps you're a practitioner and you are faced with a question or something in your practice, and you go to the literature trying to figure out, oh, what's going on here? How can I better understand what's going on? And you don't find anything. And you say, hey, maybe I should do a study that's going to look at this issue. So that's one possibility. Or you read a ton about a specific issue and you realize that all these studies have looked at college students, but you work with middle schoolers and you want to do a similar study with middle schoolers. So that's like a population gap. Or there are concepts that you find in the literature and you go like, there is this other concept from, I don't know, sociology that I think I could use to understand something in teaching. So that's a concept gap. Or all these studies that you look at are quantitative and they've done surveys with like thousands of people, but you have like these 5 students. And then you want to see, do these findings apply to my 5 students? So that would be a methodological gap. Or a time gap, something that you read and, oh yes, they did that in the 80s, but now with AI and a completely new generation of students, does it still apply, not apply? So there are all kinds of different gaps that you can explore when you write research. So there are a few examples here that we'd like to share with you. This study actually, so you can see I'm a co-author. But the first author is actually a student of mine. She was an honors student, undergraduate, and she was a bilingual herself, and she started reading for her honors thesis all these studies, a lot of it coming out of Canada, on the benefits of being bilingual. And there were lots of metalinguistic and cognitive benefits that she found, but all these studies were essentially quantitative. And that's, she was like, I wonder if the bilinguals themselves realize that there are such benefits. So what she did was a smaller scale qualitative study, lots of interviews, and she translated this data that was quantitative into her qualitative interviews. And it was really interesting because some of the benefits, the students were not aware at all, because of course, it's not like you can go back and not be bilingual to think what it would be different, But anyways, so it was very, very interesting. And then her practical implications had to do with people that work in dual language immersion schools, in bilingual schools. How can they promote the benefits of bilingual education to potential parents and students, etc.? So that was really interesting. So that was kind of like a methodological gap. And the other piece that we have here, which was also in 2022, was the challenges and strategies facing international students and faculty in higher education. Now, this was a literature review, not an empirical piece like mine. Now, what's important to note is a literature review is a very substantial piece of writing. It's not enough to just read a few pieces and summarize them. You really need to read widely and analyze those pieces and come up with a new interpretation of the literature, right? So what is your contribution from work that others have published? So in this case, she looked at international students and faculty in US higher education, and she made her own points, about the challenges that the population was facing. And now Alex will tell you about pedagogical practices, programs, policy, and perspectives.
Yes, we love alliteration. And so this is sort of a broader category, right? So coming back to this idea of bridging theory, research, and practice, this is a lot of that where those practices and that kind of theoretical stuff sometimes falls in these different practices. So these are people who are exploring different concepts, perhaps responding to something that's happening in the world of multilingual learner education, whether that's policy, certain programs, etc. And so what we're looking for in these are a bit shorter than our empirical research or our literature reviews, but we're looking at kind of what's going on in TESOL issues. And again, those things could be theory, research, practice, pedagogy, policy, etc. They could be specific to individual populations, right? Whether that's regional, whether that's language-based, whether that's origin-based, whether that's generationally based, etc. So that those kinds of things might be of interest. Curricular changes. We know that we're constantly changing curricula. I think we're going to see some really interesting work coming about of the WIDA changes that are recently happening and still sort of being sorted out in various ways. Pilot studies. So a pilot study is often if a researcher has an idea for a study that they want to look at, they'll do what's called a pilot study, similar to like a pilot from a television show, right? Where you've kind of like, this is an example of testing out this concept. And then when you see the finished product, it's on a much larger scale, it's more polished. A lot of the little kinks have been worked out, right? So that's the idea behind a pilot study is I have this idea that I want to explore this concept. So I'm going to make a little baby study to kind of test it out and see, if it's worth pursuing, how that's going to work, what changes you need to make, etc. And then just any other discussions of interest, right? Because again, this is a very broad field that we're talking about with a lot of overlapping interests. So even though I don't know that it was specifically mentioned previously, other things that come to mind are like second language acquisition, right? And education, which could include what used to be called foreign languages or world languages. Also, I've done work with heritage language learners. So all of these different pieces where we're really looking at the whole multilingual learner concept, right? And then, so here's one example. So you'll notice on the previous example, those were people who were affiliated with universities. Here you have someone who's actually affiliated with a community project. So we do have people submitting and publishing articles on all different topics coming out of all different perspectives and contexts, right? And so here this researcher was looking at this peace education and kind of thinking about this idea of service learning, but also building in how we look at empathy, civic engagement, agency, etc., as part of this English learner experience. So there's one example, right? Looking at some policies and some practices that they were working on. This other one, you can see I'm a co-author here with two of my colleagues from Georgia Southern. Dr. Elisa Leckie is also a Georgia TESOL board member. I believe she's the treasurer. Is that correct? She's the treasurer, really heavily involved. And so the three of us actually have really different experiences working with multilingual learners in a variety of different contexts. And so we came together to kind of think about offering some best practices based on our own experiences. Now, this is different from an empirical study because we weren't looking at it from a research perspective, but from the perspective of these are pedagogical practices that I have used, that my colleagues have used in our own teaching over time, and really talking about how that unfolded and worked for us across these different contexts, right? So it was across time, it was across age groups, it was different states. So really, different situations to kind of get that perspective on how do we employ some practices that are going to benefit and make things more accessible for our multilingual students.
All right, so the third type of manuscript that we want to talk about are the teaching techniques. And the teaching techniques are actually a fantastic way for you to get started in the publishing world if you're not like a researcher or you're not used to writing longer pieces. So teaching techniques are essentially articles that will look at a practice that you have been doing in your classroom that you think has led to successful learning of multilingual learners and that you'd like to share with others. So the idea of these techniques is that you would describe something that you have done that worked well for you, and you would help others understand what you have done, but also you'd help others figure out how this same technique can be adapted to different contexts. So that's very important. So if you do a technique in, say, a high school classroom, then you can say, how can you adapt that to elementary students or middle schoolers or even older learners? So the technique has to be clearly written so that people can understand specifically what your context is, but then how you can open up to other situations. And these can be warm-up activities that you have used, projects that you have carried out with your students, activities that integrated technology, or, you know, it's really, really endless, different things that you have done in your classroom. And these are wonderful pieces for us to share with each other, different innovative techniques that we have used that we believe worked well in our context, and that will help everybody increase their toolboxes, right? And these are much, much shorter than the other pieces, like 5,000 to 2,000 words, 500 to 2,000 words. So you just give it a slightly a brief introduction with some literature review, just so people can understand where you're coming from, and then, you know, step by step what it is that you've done, and then you close the piece by saying, okay, so this is what I've done in this context, but the same can be applied to different contexts this way or that way. So here are a few examples of those.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add on to that whereas the other ones we were talking in page numbers, this is, if you'll notice, in word count. And 500 to 2,000 words ends up typically being approximately between 2 and 8 pages. It's a really much shorter piece where you're exploring a specific teaching technique.
Thank you. Yes. So in this piece, for example, I think she was also a student. I'm not sure though, but right. So she talked about using readers theater and role playing to engage young English language learners. So she describes her technique, and then she says how you can actually use a readers theater or drama to help your English language teaching for different contexts. Or in this case, this author, Amy Beard, so she talked about using jigsaw strategy in the English language learner classroom to teach content-specific vocabulary. So likewise, she describes the step-by-step process that she used and how this can be transferred to different contexts. So you can see these are pieces that most of us can relate to. And if you teach multilingual learners, it's a great way to share ideas of things that you do in your own classroom. And then this one is about tilt. Tilt refers to transparency in learning and teaching. So have you tilted? Promote students' success by tilted assignments. So in this case, the person is from Georgia Gwinnett College, and the article talks about writing assignments in an English composition course. So you can see that we have from early learners to college students. So it's a wide variety of audience, but what matters is that these techniques or these activities can be adapted to different contexts. So again, this is a wonderful way to start publishing. And if you are passionate about your work and you've been in the classroom for a while, I'm sure you have something to contribute to these types of manuscripts. So please send your work to us.
Yes. Oops, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. And then, so kind of reviewing what our steps were. Step 1, you know, figuring out, is this the right venue for you to publish in? Step 2, figuring out what kind of a piece you're interested in publishing. And then step 3, which, you know, as educators, we all love, is follow the directions, right? Following the proper procedures, and being sure that we, you know, are doing what we're supposed to. So when this is a screenshot from the actual website so that you can see when you would go to submit, one of the first things it asks you to do is select which of the 3 categories you wish to publish in. So that's really important, again, for you to think that through beforehand, because that's also going to influence your audience. Even though the journal is available to everybody, different types of people tend to, be more drawn to different types of articles. And that's why it's great that we have all of these different types of publications that we do, so that there is something for everyone. So thinking about who is your audience, what are you trying to get across, and then also very important, the length, right? So if you're, you want to write a dissertation on this one teaching technique is not going to be the place to do that, right? So rethinking how you go through. And then there's a Google form and several other things that you can see. And so I want to go back to this idea of peer-reviewed and blind reviewed, in case people aren't really familiar with those concepts. If you haven't done a lot of journal publication, you might not be familiar. And so the idea is I'm looking at the people who are present here today, and I know at least 5 of them personally. And so it would be very easy for me to just say, my former student, oh, my colleague, oh, my friend, let me just publish your work. And that would be what we call unethical. And that would not make us peer reviewed, and that would not make us, this high quality journal that we are and that we strive to be. And so part of that is making sure that we have experts in the field, right, from a variety of contexts, again, from the university level, from the industry level, from classroom teachers, all across the board, who would be sent. So if you submit a manuscript, that would be blinded, meaning any identifying information would be removed, right? So it wouldn't say that I'm the 12th grade teacher at such and such high school. We would, take all that stuff out so that no one would know who you are, so that we're not biased. We would send that out to reviewers based on the content of the manuscript and their specific expertise, so that they can really look at it with a critical eye and say, yes, this is a really great, really strong study. Let's also think about adding such and such, or I have a question about this, right? Because we usually are so familiar with our own work that it's hard for us often to see where we might be falling short or where we need details added, because I already know all the steps, so it makes perfect sense to me. So sending it out to those professionals, right, who volunteer to review for us, they give their feedback. That feedback is blinded on that side, and that's what makes it double blinded, right? So it's blinded on both sides, so that when the author gets that feedback back, they don't know where that's coming from either, except that it's an expert in the field, and then decisions are made based on that. So that's really important to keeping the ethical quality, and then actually the publication quality of the journal, is that blind review process. And that peer review process. APA is the style manual that we use in the field of educational research and education broadly. I know sometimes individual disciplines have different things that they follow, but we use APA, and we're now on APA 7, so that is the expectation. So you can kind of see through there. Let's go on to the next bit. Okay. This is the aforementioned Google form. Thank you. And then, yeah, that's fine. APA, and Dave has graciously put a link in the comments. And if you are not super familiar with APA, I always recommend people use Purdue OWL. That's an excellent resource to kind of help you when you have those questions about that formatting, because it is not the most natural way of writing, in the way that academic writing generally is not the most natural way of writing or speaking for human people. All right. And that's, and those are the key points. Eliana, do you want to add anything?
No, I was just going to reinforce the APA 7th part of it a little bit. And it's not because I want to be like a picky person, but this is the part of the process you have complete control over. You can actually take your time and make sure the formatting is correct. And that will prevent you from getting a ton of comments on your manuscript saying that your piece does not comply with APA 7th. So if you want to avoid those comments, which you can control, so you should carefully review your manuscript to make sure that it complies with APA 7th.
And another note on APA is it is a fairly, thank you for that, it is a fairly clunky way to cite things. So if you've done a lot of reading of things that are in APA, you'll notice there's these long strings of citations in the middle of your sentence. And it's, you know, so-and-so in year and so-and-so in year, and it just goes on. And it is ugly and it is clunky. And so what makes it worse is when it's not done correctly and accurately, right? And so it makes it even clunkier. So it's nice to kind of get in the groove of doing that. So then you kind of learn to move past. And then the importance of those citations is sometimes there's a really interesting statistic or somebody found an interesting, you know, you read about a study, you know, one study found 23% of blah, 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 blah. And you go, oh, let me know more about that, right? And then that citation will let you know where you can go to learn more about that. So it's a really great way to kind of expand and deepen your interest in different topics as well.
But again, if you're terrified by APA, do not let that stop you from submitting your work, and we will work with you. So, do we have any comments or questions? Or Dave, would you like to add anything?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I just put all my stuff in the chat box.
We're always happy to receive manuscripts. So please consider writing up the work that you're already doing and submitting it to us.
Dr. Hirano, Dr. Reyes, I have a question. May I?
Yes,
please.
Good. Maybe it helps someone else that is in the same situation as I am. So I'm almost done with my dissertation, 6 more months. And I was hoping I could publish in Georgia TESOL. It's a correlation between, you know, the access test scores and universal screeners. So it's academic achievement and English language proficiency. And I was hoping, is this something I can do in Georgia TESOL Journal?
You're talking about the WIDA access?
Yes.
Oh, yes, please. That would be fantastic. Yes.
So you can transform a dissertation. Wonderful. So you can
Yes.
transform a dissertation in an empirical study article,
yes.
correct?
So typically what would happen for those of you who are interested in doctoral work who are, you know, going through that process is because the dissertation is such a large undertaking, a lot of times you can pull out pieces to focus on from that, and then you build out those pieces to a full-scale article so that you're not taking, you know, a 200, 300, 400 page dissertation and just publishing one article from it, but that you're really zooming in on one piece of what you found, fleshing that out even more so that you can make it work for you in multiple ways besides just getting your doctorate, and to getting those multiple publications, right? By just kind of zooming into the different pieces of it.
Sounds wonderful. Maybe someone else is in the same situation and they wanted to know about this. And I think Vivian Moore has a question from Baldwin Elementary. Her question is, when are the next issues scheduled to be published?
We are hoping to have an issue out still in spring, so coming up in a couple of months. And we would really like to have 2 issues a year. And sometimes it's really difficult to make that happen, but that's our goal and our wish. So submit to us so that we can make it happen.
Yes, submit to us so we can make that happen. If you were to submit something today or tomorrow, then that would be considered for our fall issue, because we have what we need for our spring issue. The actual timing of it is dependent on how quickly our reviewers get us our reviews and how quickly our authors respond to revisions. And again, just to kind of reiterate that our reviewers are volunteering to do that as part of their service or just as a passion project. And then our board members as well. So nobody's really getting paid from this. There's an itty bitty stipend for some folks involved, but in general, people are doing it as a labor of love. And so, you know, taking that into consideration, that does kind of lengthen out the timeline sometimes, whereas it's weird how sometimes people are more motivated if they're getting paid. So.
And Viviane, I've been thinking about you actually, and I think you should definitely submit something about the work that you do with parents of multilingual learners in your school. I think that would be a really good example of good work that can be done with parents also in schools to have more involvement and engagement from parents. So please do submit something.
Yes. And I will say,
Oh, no,
Dave,
sorry. I was wondering if Dr. Moore, Viviane, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
So I have a couple questions for you.
Yes.
Number one, did you publish from your dissertation yet?
I published one article out of it, but I do need to go back and publish more of my findings.
So
Yes.
when you publish more of your findings, I recommend embargo it.
Mm-hmm.
And because if you don't embargo it, I mean, with Georgia TESOL, we're okay, I think. But if you don't, you go for other journals, it might be considered self-plagiarism.
Uh-huh. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, just go into UGA system, put embargo, and then you're good to go.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Eliana and Alex, thank you so much for the presentation. We'll definitely try to work on something for the fall issue. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yes, and I will say, again, based on my personal knowledge of some of the folks here with us today, sometimes the projects that you conceptualize in your coursework, so whether you're doing, I don't know, for example, an MET and TCLAD at Georgia Southern, or whether you were doing an EDS or a doctoral degree somewhere, some of those projects and papers and research that you're doing as part of your coursework can then be, again, fleshed out, right? You want to add to that. You want to really dig in and give that rigor to it and be published with our journal. So I know a lot of great projects are conceptualized and carried out as part of education programs. And so those things can also be great ways to kind of get your work out there.
That's wonderful. I just love all the possibilities that you guys give and the work that you put into this and the love that you put into this. I'm very grateful for that. I wanted to share with you guys, and I don't know, because we changed the way we're sharing. Give me 1 second, please. And I'm going to share with you my screen. And I am not, you're seeing almost to the last slide, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing a QR code? Wonderful. Yeah. Well, Dr. Hirano and Dr. Reyes, what an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I learned so much from the Georgia TESOL Journal. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people because what I love is that you can publish in a big range of variety of articles. They don't all have to be dissertations at all. It can be from actual experience. And this can really, really help educators, which is at the end of the day, what we're here for. So thank you so much for an amazing presentation. It's being recorded and it will be uploaded. So this is going to help a lot of people. I'm sure about that. And I know it helped me. So thank you. And I would like you all to please take a moment to fill out the survey that we have in this QR code, because all the feedback you can give us will help improve all the presentations here at Georgia TESOL, and be aware of our next presentations coming up. So please take a few moments. We're almost done. It's 6:15. We finished before time. So yes, if you guys want to say something.
Can we add the survey link to the chat?
Absolutely. Yes, give me 1 second because I have it in my other screen. So.
And I would love to see some submissions about migrant education, Margarita.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to minimize my screen. Give me a second, please. Thank you. You're going to see the QR code back on the presentation mode. And I think you should be seeing on the chat as in a few seconds. Is that it? Can you all see it? The form survey?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Good. Margarita is thinking about it. That's great.
And I see GCS thinking real hard about what she's going to submit. Yeah.
I love it.
This is wonderful. It was really helpful. I actually was telling Dr. Hirano at the beginning of the session that I chose particularly to moderate this session because I was really interested in the topic. So it is my favorite. So are there any questions, guys? You can just chime in. We have a few minutes left.
I just want to say that it helped. And Mandy and I are in the same program doing our PhD in Interamerican University of Puerto Rico. And our professor, we've had her 2 semesters in a row, and she's pushing for us to like publish. You need, so everything we do, she does it with that mindset. And she was very clear from the first semester, this is what you all need to be doing. And it's kind of intimidating. So, because I sit here and like Dr. Reyes is sitting right there. She was my professor. And I'm like, I'm not going to publish something in front of her. Like, who would think I would never do that, right? But having it in this setting, it takes away that fear a little bit. Like, I'm not doing it. You're not offering it to judge me. You're offering it to help me and put it out there so we can all be part of this community. So I appreciate the way this went down, because it's like, okay, now I can totally think about actually publishing them. I'm not saying I'm going to do it tomorrow, but I'm saying that now I'm not so fearful of it. So I appreciate it.
Right. And I mean, and so, I mean, it sounds a little bit cheesy, but we really are here to help. And so, you know, we have people who reach out to us and say, I'm thinking about this. Does this seem like it would fit in the journal? Or, you know, and getting that kind of feedback, or what would I need to do to turn this into something publishable, etc. So we really do take that seriously in terms of helping.
Because it is overwhelming. I mean, as a student, as full-time working and full-time student, and like, oh, and you look at it and like, these are the requirements.
Right.
Like, X out, absolutely not. I'm not even going to see what it is that you want from me because it's too much. So it seems doable now. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
It's 100% doable. We wouldn't tell you unless it was.
I love it. Thank you for sharing.
Can I ask, can we go back one slide? I think everyone should have had a moment to do this, because we also have a QR code that will take you to the actual journal. So if you're interested in just kind of, you know, saving that, I've always got a bunch of open tabs in my phone and on my computer of things that I'm interested in looking at, maybe later, right? Like maybe I don't have the time right now, but you can open this in your QR code and then just keep that tab on the background for when you have a moment and want to look through. So we've really been talking a lot about the publication process, which was the point of this session, but also hopefully this has inspired you to go through and look at the journal for what you can, you know, learn from it yourself as well. So to go through and see like, oh, what are some of the pedagogical practices that I want to look at? What are some teaching techniques? What is being talked about with this particular area of research, or what's the literature saying about this, that, and the other?
I have a question. If somebody wants to challenge another article, would you guys accept something like that?
Sure. And tell us more about that for the folks who aren't familiar with what you're kind of suggesting.
Let's say if you're a researcher and you don't agree with someone's epistemology or ontology, or how they view how they're trying to analyze data, for example. Let's say you just question it, or let's say you want to do a replication study, or let's say you want to address some facts you think are misquoted or something like that. So like have that conversation. Would Georgia Journal accept that?
I mean, I would say yes, and I would say that falls under the pedagogical or perspectives, right? Sort of that more nebulous category that we have.
Yeah.
Because that is an interesting perspective, right? And so again, for the people who are not as familiar with empirical research and literature reviews, that's often what we are doing, is when we talk about finding that gap, it could be, oh, well, you're looking at this, but you're not taking this thing into consideration, right? Or for me, when I was doing my dissertation work, I was trying to look at what heritage language, Spanish heritage language that wasn't based in a school, right, that was based in a community, looked like in the South. And so that's very specific. There's tons of stuff on what that looks like in California and Texas, and there's tons of stuff on what that looks like in a school setting. But with my particular area, it was much harder, right? And so sometimes we see, you're looking at this, but here's what I want to do. So sometimes that's where we find the gap in our literature review or our research focus, but then also in those perspectives, right? And so I would say that, yes, we would welcome that. But again, it has to be rigorous. It has to be theoretically sound, that we can't just say like, well, I don't like what you're saying, but that we have, you know, that support behind it in bringing up these, you know, rigorous and relevant academic conversations. And then, yes, I'm just looking at the chat. Thank you for responding. Yes.
Yes, we're all for civic conversations. So it's part of the field. We need to engage with each other in respectful and academic way. So that would be encouraged.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about some scholars who are just starting out and maybe they might want to replicate something. Just an idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, again, that's a different context, it's a different time, it's a different everything. And then that can lead to some really rich conversation around, we replicated it and we found the same thing, or we replicated it and we didn't find the same thing, right? And then that opens up new avenues for exploration.
Exactly. All right, friends. So thank you all for coming. This has been lovely.
Yes, thank you.
And
It's been fantastic.
thank you for being a great moderator and organizing this, Judith. So
it's my pleasure. I've learned. Thank you everyone for being here.
Right.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Danielle. And there was a question on the chat. I'm sure you all answered it. It was yes, it was about the fall 2022. Yes. Perfect. Wonderful.
All right. Thank you all.
And you did
all right.
say
Thank you. Good
I'm going to
night.
stop the recording. If I may, I don't know what it is. There you are.